Lloyd is a village boy who is everything apart from an average person, despite his misconception of him being below average. He is from a remote village that is well known for producing heroes and individuals of incredible physical prowess. Lloyd is the weakest member of his own village, and as a result, he does not have faith in his own talents, despite the fact that he is stronger than practically everyone who lives outside of his village. He travels to the city in order to join the army there, and while he is there, he decides to see a witch called Marie who lives in the city. She was initially quite uninterested in him and urged him to go find somewhere to stay, but once he mentioned the witch called Alka, who was the leader of his village, a dramatic shift occurred in her demeanor toward him. He gives her a crystal ball, and when she looks into it, reveals a projection of Alka, who was evidently Marie's instructor. She gives her the command to look after Lloyd for as long as he continues to reside in the city, and she complies with it only grudgingly. The following day, he heads into town to take care of some business, and as he is traversing an alleyway, he sees a young woman who is being harassed by a monstrous grasshopper. He rushes over to help her and launches himself off a building, kicks the grasshopper in the head, instantly killing it, and then tosses it into the air. The young woman expresses her admiration for Lloyd before introducing herself as Selen, also known as the Belt Princess, due to the fact that she was cursed as a kid and now has a belt around her head. He walks away from the situation and goes to collect the things that Marie desired. The next day, he continues on to the selection, where he meets a girl with a metallic hand who introduces herself as Rio. She is immensely terrified of him since she is aware of the tremendous power that he has. Selen comes in the midst of the chat and is immediately filled with love for Lloyd before she even has a chance to start the dialogue. The selection process starts, and after he finishes the exam and checks the results, he is stunned to discover that he was not selected, as he failed the exam. Lloyd gets disheartened by this incident but decides that he cannot go back to his village as everyone in the village gave him such a big send-off and they would be disappointed if he failed, so he goes to a local cafeteria, headed by a former head of the royal guards named Crone, who instantly attacks Lloyd as soon as he comes in, as he can already sense his overwhelming strength. He thinks that Lloyd is some other country's strongest assassin and has been sent here. Lloyd asks for a part-time job, which confuses Crone, but he decides to play along. He is astonished by Lloyd's cooking and hires him as a part-time worker. Later, he goes back to Marie's house, where he finds her talking to Alka, who uses the crystal ball as a teleportation device. He tells her that he wants to stay in this country for a while longer, so he can attempt the next year's exam, to which Marie agrees. Later the next day, he is spotted by the current head of the selection committee, Melfin, who is accompanied by Riho. They are surprised to see him working for a cafeteria, and later, when Lloyd goes out to take out the trash, he spots Marie going into an alleyway. He follows her, but she disappears, and instead he finds Selen, who seems to be in a standoff against a big noble guy who is introduced as Alan. Melfin decides to pitch a sparring session between Alan and Lloyd to see what Lloyd is capable of, and Alan agrees. Lloyd is reluctant and says he is very weak, but agrees when Alan pleads with him, and to even out the odds, Alan allows Lloyd to hit him straight in the face once, but before he can hit him, a gust of wind interrupts him and he is taken away by a tornado, who turns out to be Marie, saving Alan from an instant demise. Marie lands on a rooftop with Lloyd and she tries to scold him about him trying to punch the man, as it could have been fatal for him. Lloyd believes that Marie is upset with him because he tried to fight someone who was very strong and his life was in danger, so he apologizes and thanks Marie for saving his life. Later on, Rio and Selen go to Marie's house looking for information about the missing princess. However, as soon as Rio meets Marie, she realizes that she was in fact the princess hiding behind a disguise all along. She acknowledges that she is the princess and reveals to them that the king is under the influence of an unknown entity that is attempting to instigate a conflict between two kingdoms that would lead to the utter ruin of both countries. Lloyd seems to have a misunderstanding of the situation and thinks that Marie is going to save this kingdom, so Marie goes along with his interpretation. She flatly refuses Lloyd's plea to let him assist her, explaining that he is very weak and that his presence would only slow her down because he would be getting in her way. Lloyd's heart is shattered by the news and he quickly retreats to his room. She had no choice but to make the statement, since Alka had given her strict instructions not to engage Lloyd in the kingdom's predicament, as the people of Kunlun do not engage in disputes between countries, and they only help a kingdom if the situation is totally out of their hand, like in the case of an attack by a demon king. Later, while attending a fair with Alka, who tried to cheer him up, he sees a group of enormous grasshoppers assaulting the booths. He easily deals with them, then looks over at the castle, gets the impression that some kind of trouble might be brewing there, and tells Alka that he has to leave right now. Lloyd makes a beeline towards the castle, but on the way he collides with Alan, who is cowering behind a box because he is terrified of a gigantic grasshopper. As is his custom, Lloyd swiftly dealt with the grasshopper and then ends up giving him a pep talk, which motivates him and makes him feel braver than before. Quickly, Lloyd makes his way to the castle, where he discovers Crone, Selen, and Riho struggling to defend themselves against the possessed iteration of Melfin. While he is attempting to communicate with Melfin, he accidentally knocks him out, believing that Melfin is merely intoxicated. At the exact moment when he was ready to take the next step, the gate opens and a battered and bruised Marie comes in, closely followed by the king, who is presently under the control of the Demon King. She keeps up appearances and pretends to have vanquished the monster, but while she was resting, this drunkard attempted to harass her, and she instructs Lloyd to clean him up with his archaic rune magic. He follows through with this plan, and as a result, the Demon King is vanquished. The next day, he learns that he has been accepted into the academy because Alan, as a reward for his hard work, requested to enroll Lloyd in the school rather than requesting for a promotion for himself. Mary takes Lloyd out to a village with Chrome and has him take out the legendary sword which has been stuck in a rock. Lloyd is very easily able to take the sword out. Later the next day, they undergo training, which is very hard for everyone else, but absolutely nothing for Lloyd, and when it came to magic, his magic was so strong that he was refused participation by Colleen, as she thought that in the inter-school competition, he might kill someone. When he returns home that day, he is greeted with a kick to his head and his ribs by a girl named Philo, who sensed his overwhelming presence and attacked him on instinct. He doesn't think much of it, but his resilience makes Philo fall for him. She is accompanied by her friend Mina, who is trying to find Rio, and they thank him for the knowledge before Marie kicks them out. The next day, during training, a tall woman named Roll walks in who seems to know Rio. She is accompanied by both Philo and Mina. She has a conversation with Rio out of earshot, after which Rio gets very agitated and gloomy. He notices that and feels terrible about it, so he asks Marie about it. She replies that if it's a girl, he should take her on a date, so he asks Rio out on a date, which she accepts. On the date, she reveals that she was an orphan, and she met Roll at the orphanage. Roll was gifted with magic, and she taught Rio how to do magic. One day she came back with a mithril arm for Rio, which she thought was a gift because Rio didn't have a left arm, but later she figured out that Roll wanted Rio to pull out the legendary sword, which would ultimately result in Rio losing her life, and it devastated her and she ran away. He is very sympathetic, and after talking to him, she starts feeling better. The next day, they go to the stadium to check it out, and there they are met by Roll, Philo, and Mina again. Before they could begin their conversation, a second-year student who introduces herself as Makona jumps down from above and challenges Philo to a fight. The practice match begins, and she powers up to use her flame magic, whereas Philo seems calm and prepares her water magic. Makona jumps with full intensity, but is easily swept aside by Philo's water magic. Lloyd runs towards Makona and offers her a helping hand, but she refuses to take his help. Later, when he returns back home, he finds Makona sitting with Marie, who is patching her up, but as soon as Lloyd comes, Marie goes over to him in the kitchen, leaving Makona devastated. The tournament starts the next day, and the first match is Philo against Selen. Philo casts thunder magic, but surprisingly, Selen's magic belt doesn't react to it, leaving her undefended. She starts running away from Philo's attack, and then Philo begins to cast a huge blast of magic straight onto Selen, but before it could hit her, her belt responded and protected her. After that, every single attack Philo tried was defended by the belt. When Philo ran out of magic energy, Selen used her belt to trap her and was about to use her magic on Philo, but the referee disqualified her because trapping an opponent with a physical object was against the rules, making Philo the winner. The second match is between Lloyd and Mina. Mina starts by using her water magic to try and suffocate him out, but even after 20 minutes he is totally fine, so she uses a magic spell to encase him in a wall of water, and then she starts using another magic spell to attack him. He senses this and uses his own wind magic to blow her out of the ring, easily winning the match. The final fight is between Rio and Roll. Both of them start by shooting a barrage of flame magic at each other. Roll's plan is to exhaust Rio of her magical power, but doesn't work. So she closes the distance, and with a magic spell, she removes the magical arm on Rio. But Rio is prepared for this and uses a magic stone to first punch Roll, and then directly use flame magic on her, defeating her and winning the tournament. Later, when Lloyd returns home, he finds a note saying that Roll has taken something very dear to Lloyd, and that she will return it if he gives her the legendary sword. Lloyd panics, assuming Marie has been kidnapped, and runs towards the aforementioned location, only to be intercepted by Philo. She challenges him to a fight and starts attacking him relentlessly. He blocks all of her attacks and makes her promise that if he wins, she will reveal the location of Marie, which she agrees to. Lloyd remembers that back in his village, a girl younger than him broke his arm when she slapped him on his arm as a joke, so he thinks that there is no way he could defeat Philo, so he ends up challenging her to an arm wrestling match, which she agrees to. The match begins, and its intensity blows everything away. The box beneath them breaks, and they jump in the air, continuing their match. Just when Philo starts gaining the advantage, Lloyd uses his wind magic to hurl them both to the ground, and when the dust settles, we see that he wins the match. As promised, Philo reveals that Marie is still in her house, as she never kidnapped Marie. She just took the magic crystal, and it turns out that Marie got cursed by Alka, and she was just in the washroom. Lloyd and friends are made aware of a dungeon near the capital that is plagued by a giant snake, and they are ordered by the king to eliminate it. They'd all go to the dungeon together, but Alan ends up staying outside for guard duty. During the expedition, Lloyd gets separated by Philo, Selen, and Rio, and ends up running towards a couple of large explosions. He enters a giant ruins and after scanning it, notices that there is a giant tree-like structure in the middle of the room, which seems to be originating from Mecomina, and the tentacles of the tree have captured Marie, who was flown over to this dungeon by Alka because she thought something was not right. Lloyd tells Mecona to leave her alone. She refuses, and she charges towards him. Their punches collide, but she is blown away by his power. She uses her tentacles to attack him, but his supernatural speed, stamina, and precision help him to dodge every single attack of hers. He grabs one of the fallen tree trunks and throws it at her, which she is able to dodge skillfully. She uses her Godspeed ability and charges towards him, delivering a powerful kick that, even after blocking, sends him flying into the wall. She takes advantage of the small opening and rushes him again, punching his face in the wall and dragging him for a long distance on the wall. He grabs her hand and throws her to the ground, and she uses her tentacles again to attack him, which he keeps dodging and blocking, but suddenly Selen, Riho, and Philo arrive in the chamber after hearing all the commotion. Mecona, knowing that he cares for his friends more than himself, targets her attack on them, but Lloyd is quick to react and stands in front of them. Lloyd still gets up and powers up, but Mecona doesn't give him any time to recover and attacks him. Their punches clash again, and this time the intensity is so high that the entire chamber starts collapsing. A hole opens beneath them, and they all start falling while Mecona and Lloyd fight in midair with godlike speed. She punches him and he crashes down on the floor, but instantly gets up, ready for another bout. She then reinforces her tree tentacles and attacks him with it, and he is shoved into the wall once again. But Lloyd grabs her tentacles and swings her around, gaining momentum with each turn, before throwing her upwards, breaking the chamber walls and disappearing in the sky. Before he can catch his breath, though, the giant snake appears behind him, but instead of attacking him, he tells them that his name is Veritra and he is the guardian of Kunlun. Suddenly, a strange old man emerges from one of the entrances, and Lloyd immediately senses malice in him. Before he could do anything, Alka emerged, breaking one of the chamber walls. She seems to recognize the old man and addresses him as Sue. He jumps on Veritra's back and stabs him with his hand, taking out his heart and destroying it, apparently killing Veritra. He did it in the hopes of defeating Alka. Alka gets enraged and punches him, which sends him flying to the wall, leaving him baffled as to how she still has this much power. Turns out that the belt that Selen has was made up of Veritra's skin, and before he could be killed, he transferred his consciousness into that belt and survived the attack. He uses his magic seal and disappears from the area as the dungeon starts collapsing. The rest of them quickly use Alka's magic crystal to leave the dungeon as well. Alka decides to take Lloyd and his friends to Kunlun because she wants to resurrect Veritra in his normal form. She takes them to a cave where a dwarf named Eug awaits them. After a brief greeting, they go through a portal and arrive at Kunlun. The next day, Luke takes the rest to the last dungeon, the original dungeon, which contains all the demon lords and can be unlocked by a key, which turns out to be the legendary sword that Lloyd pulled out of the rock. She proceeds to try and revive Veritra, and in the process she seals him in an egg, saying that it will take some time before he is revived in his original form. She tests whether Veritra has been sealed by hitting Alka on the head, and she feels pain. Yev explains that now Alka is essentially a 9-year-old child with a grown-up brain, and all her physical and magical abilities are sealed for the time being. She then takes Alka for a walk, because they had to talk, and she tells the rest to arrive near the portal as she will join them soon. Later, when Lloyd arrives at the portal, he finds only Eug standing there. She explains that the rest of his friends have gone ahead of him, but Alka is nowhere to be seen. She expresses her concern over Alka's disappearance as she is only a 9-year-old child now, prompting Lloyd to search for her. He goes over the mountains and the village and the forest but can't seem to locate her. He remembers that once he fell in a pit near this area and was stuck. Later, he was found by Alka and the villagers who helped him out. While searching the area, he spots a big rock covering an entrance, and when he pushes it aside, he finds Alka trapped in a pit. He jumps down and takes her on his back before jumping back out. She explains to him that Eug has defected and she is now with the enemies. She tells him that it was a very elaborate plan that included Sue as well. Lloyd quickly tries to make his way out of the village to prevent any kind of disaster from happening. Lloyd asks the villagers for help, and they shove him into the cannon and launch him with their magic, which, alongside his wind magic, generates enough power to help him reach the capital at once. He arrives in the middle of the stadium and looks around to find the area swarmed by giant grasshoppers. He spots Eug and throws a boulder at her, which she dodges. Lloyd tells her to hand over the egg as per Alka's instructions, which Eug obviously refuses. Eug summons one of her golems, which absorbs Mecona. It's a power boost and attacks him. He is able to block its punch and throw it away. The golem quickly falls on its feet and launches itself at him again. This time the punches clash, but Lloyd's overwhelming strength ends up breaking the golem's arm. His friends cheer for him, but it is fleeting because the golem regenerates its arm in seconds. Lloyd takes out his knife and proceeds to basically chop the rock monster into pieces, downing him again, but it is of no use as he has simply regenerated his entire body once again. The golem punches down at him, but he is able to dodge the attack and launches a kick towards it. But Yuve understands his nature and proceeds to put Makona in front, so that if he kicks, he ends up hurting her. Lloyd obviously changes his course, which is taken advantage of as the golem smacks him away like a fly. Before he can get up, the golem launches a kick at him, successfully hurting him. He then repeatedly punches Lloyd before picking him up and throwing him in the center. The golem then continues punching the already fallen Lloyd, who at this point is bleeding profusely from his head. Suddenly, Melfin appears in front of Lloyd, blocking the golem's punch and pushing it back. He then proceeds to attack the golem again and again, cutting his body parts as much as he can, trying to give Lloyd the chance to recover. Meanwhile, Rito and Marie are able to get through to the unconscious Makona, who takes control of herself and detaches herself from the golem, weakening it. While Yu was distracted controlling the golem, Selen sneaks up on her and steals the egg in which Viritra is trapped, unsealing it once again. This distraction was all that Lloyd needed as he grabbed the golem and threw it into the air before obliterating it with his wind magic. Suddenly, a magic circle appears in the sky and rocks fall on every single grasshopper monster in the area, announcing the arrival of Alka, who regained her power after the release of Vritra. Before she can capture Eve, though, she is taken by Sue and Shuma, who vanish through a magic circle. Lloyd and company go back to Marie's place, where they make further plans to defeat Sue in the upcoming battles.